Good morning, good morning, good morning. My name is Reverend Tamara, and this morning I like to start each sermon with you participating at the level of your intention. As I set my intention in this next moment of what I want to offer, I invite you to set your intention of what you would like to receive from our beautiful music to our fellow congregants next to us and to the message. So in this moment, let us take a deep breath together and set our intention for what we want to walk away from and carry with us during this week. Are we ready? Here we go. Breathe in and release. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, what's wonderful about this month is that all centers all across the country, and even in the countries we are in, such as Africa, the Centers for Spiritual Living have a monthly theme. And as Elijah said, this month's theme is radical interconnections. And what I like to do is I like to go to our Webster Dictionary and find out what it has to say. And many times I find that it's actually very spiritual and profound if you dig a little deeper. The word radical comes from the Latin word root. Radical thinking dares to venture beyond existing frameworks and constraints, fostering creativity, innovation, and deep growth. Radical love is synonymous with unconditional agape love. Spiritual radicalism is to go back to our roots of faith. Interconnectedness. In the Webster's Dictionary, it says things that are mutually joined or related, things that are connected between parts of the whole. Interconnectedness as a worldview emphasizes the deep interdependence of life on everything on earth, from the personal to the collective. That said a lot to me. So as I was meditating, I picked up an old book I've had by my bedside for a long time. It's His Holiness the Dalai Lama, A Call for a Revolution. And I would like to read something from the Dalai Lama. My classical education in Buddhist thought taught me about the laws of interdependence and the human potential for infinite compassion. Our prayers include the four immeasurables: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Yet over and above religion, contemporary physics has afforded me a glimpse of the infinite quality of these states of consciousness from a different angle. Quantum vision confirms the ancestral intuition that interdependence exists at a subtle level of extreme intricacy. Even in your most subtle levels of consciousness, you resonate with the solar system, the Milky Way, and the cosmos, way beyond anything you could ever imagine. Before your birth, during your life, after the death of your physical body, your cells vibrate with the universe, the limits of which are unknown. Your thoughts and your feelings go far beyond what is imaginable. For when you change as an individual, you change the world. I want to go straight to the story that I have. It's only taken me a mere 55 years to figure this one out. And I'm not quite sure I really have figured it out altogether. But my perceptions have changed. In sitting down and wondering about things that I felt were unfair and unjust, I came to a moment as a 12-year-old, going into junior high, 7th grade, 1969. And in 1969, girls had just been given the opportunity to wear pants to school. That was a big deal if you were a girl. As I entered the 7th grade, I was excited but a little dorky around the edges, wanting so desperately to be popular, to be liked, to belong. And I was afforded the opportunity to encounter a bully. Now, it was a group of bullies who, after school, stood on the street corner so that as certain students like myself stepped off the school grounds, we got the crap beaten out of us, to say no less. Mostly humiliation, not necessarily a lot of physical violence. Slapped, the hair pulled, pushed against a fence. And I was afraid. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. So I went home to talk to my parents. I wanted them to save me. I wanted them to protect me. I wanted them to get rid of those bullies at any cost and by any means. I wanted to feel safe. Both my parents are school teachers. My mother worked in the migrant camps in the fields of Gilroy, California at the Luchesa migrant camp. And my father taught mathematics in high school. Both served in the World War II. My mother in the Coast Guard, my father Lieutenant Colonel in the Army Air Corps. As I went home and told them, they asked, "Are you hurt?" And I said, "I'm okay." And I go, "What are you going to do?" And my father pretty much said, "Well, if you were a boy, I'd tell him to punch him back, but you're not. You're a girl in a dress, My mother said, as she so often did, "Well, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So hitting back is not an option, not brute force." And my parents went on to explain, which I really didn't care at the time because they were just words to me. I wanted them to stop those people that were hurting me and humiliating me. My mother said, "Ignorance cannot be killed by brute violence." And my father said, "The pen is mightier than the sword." And I thought, what are you talking about? I'm 12, right? Those kids are hitting me. And my mother said, "Well, you should come after school to see where these kids that were actually beating me up were from." And what I noticed is all the girls that were in this gang were from the migrant camps. These families had to go from school to school to follow the crops. Can you imagine how tough that is? Living in camps that are substandard for the little white privileged middle class child who had their own room and didn't have to share meals, or maybe not have a full meal or a lunch to take. But that still didn't matter because they were beating me up. And what happened is my parents did nothing but keep on sharing with me about a worldview perception that I wasn't totally understanding. Most of my friends were Hispanic. It was a Hispanic community. But those girls, they dressed in black, black shoes, black pants, black jackets, and they were mean. And so there were two choices. Either I was going to have to punch back or figure out a way not to get hurt or to be safe, not to be humiliated. I didn't realize it at the time because I was pretty mad at my parents. For many, many years, I always thought, why didn't they do anything about that? But here's the magic. Here's the gift. I started trying to figure out of curiosity, why they acted the way they did. So I started watching them. I started paying attention to how they moved, what they talked about, what their interests were. And one afternoon, my mother came to me and said, this particular girl, Sylvia, sister had just died from meningitis, and that the family was really struggling, and that I should think about, how other people have to deal with different things in life that are difficult. And so I thought, being the white privileged little girl from a middle-class home, I thought I would go tell her I'm sorry that her sister died. So I went up and I said, Sylvia, I heard your sister passed. I am so sorry. I didn't have the right. I didn't have the understanding. I wasn't placing myself in that situation. And if looks could kill, the daggers from her eyes, I would be dead. And the disdain that came from her was horrific. I said, well, shoot, that manipulation didn't work, trying to find empathy. And I don't necessarily think it was manipulation. I was trying to find a connection, the interconnectionness, the connection. So little by little, as I watched, I noticed what was respected in that particular group of girls. It was to hold your head high. And when you acknowledge someone, you didn't use their first name. Hi, Tammy, how are you? It was, hey, Merrill, hey, Gonzalez, So I went by her in the morning, and I slightly tipped my head up in respect. Then, a few weeks later, I used her name. Hey, Sanchez. Kept walking. Never tried to have a conversation. I didn't deserve that right then in her world of protection and her need for safety. As time went on, they were in the bathrooms, and they were smoking cigarettes, doing all the bad things you weren't supposed to do. They locked the gym teacher in the ball closet. They had balls, to say the least. So as time went on, I made conversations with some of the girls that weren't quite as fierce. And I talked to them. And then when I walked in the migrant camps with my mother, I did the respect thing. I didn't try to be all, hi, how are you? And little by little, and it was so very subtle, I started to gain something I didn't know I had lost or didn't have. And that was confidence. That was confidence and curiosity to see what's going on with them at a different level. And I want you to know, although it took 2 years of falling on my face, I never lost the curiosity to try to figure out someone and be able to communicate with them. It was something that was fascinating all of a sudden to me. How do I communicate to somebody who's walking a different journey? When I got into high school, my confidence had soared. And to step back just a bit, my parents sent me to the Centers of Spiritual Living, Religious Science youth camp every Sunday, where I did my affirmations, where I did my visualizations, where there were kids from all different cultures that we bonded and connected. I asked questions. When I reached high school, I never got beaten up. Matter of fact, those same girls came to me and asked me, Can you help my little sister become a cheerleader? Can you help my brother get on the baseball team? How do you go about that? How do you fill out this form? That's a revolution, people. But as a 12-year-old, all I knew it was over, and I was more popular. And as I look back, the strengths I gained in that struggle have built the very values that I cherish about myself. The very values. I wouldn't have learned them if I hadn't struggled with them. And now, I don't know for most of you, but for me, I sit in my living room and I'm dealing with another bully. And I want you to know that there's a thing called a good fight. And it's in the Webster Dictionary as a spiritual fight, a good fight. And if anybody looks at our history, they know that is the spiritual folk who used in the 21st century the ability to not use the sword, but to use the pen. It is the spiritual people who know where their power comes from the invisible essence, that we are connected to the cosmos, that instinctively we know there is something greater going on. And we cannot be locked into an ego matrix that thinks that it must be brute force to overcome tyranny. We cannot. You cannot sit back there as a spiritual warrior and think it's passive not to get in the good fight. And when you're angry, it is your responsibility as well as my responsibility to remember that we must turn poison into medicine, and that includes our own pain. That includes our own anger, because the next step up from anger is passion. The passion for social justice, because we are interconnected. And to sit back and say, oh God, I hope I'm not next. Oh God, I hope it's not me. Bull. We are spiritual warriors. And the survival of the fittest is not the brute force. Survival of the fittest is people who cooperate and learn, instead of conquering another tribe, we learn how to trade. We learn that interconnectedness is the essence for our survival. Our tools are compassion. Nobody promised us a rose garden, people. Nobody promised us that this life was going to be without struggle. They're selling you a lot of poppycock, as my father used to say. You know why? If you look at birth itself, it's a struggle. It's messy. It's painful. We're birthing a new age. Whether you're on the younger stream or the golden stream, we're still here. And as a spiritual warrior, we're in a good fight. And the house is on fire. You say, what can I do? I implore you that within you, you know where you have the good fight. Reverend Deborah helped me with this when she said, Tamara, what do you love about America? And I said, you know what I love? I love the way we take care of the most vulnerable people in this country, the disabled, the elderly, the socioeconomically impoverished. I know because I've lived somewhere where they aren't able to do that or don't choose to find ways to do that, and you step over people who are crawling on their hands and knees without a wheelchair. When you crawl over children that are tossed out in the cold with no parents, no orphanage, no social systems, no crappy foster system, but at least it's a foster system. You know what? We don't have to step up and step out and over humanity. We're trying to figure it out. Is that worth fighting for? Is that worth fighting for? What is it that you love that's worth fighting for? Don't sit there and say, oh, I just don't want to get involved. Oh, and be in despair and apathy and acquiesce. It is time for you to be and do. We talk about prayer in this organization as spiritual mind treatment. And Ernest Holmes always said, yes, you treat and move your feet. This is not about violence or flesh and bone war. This war is about changing the hearts and minds of our brothers and sisters who have lost their way. And it is not done by shame. It is not done by blame, because that's their game. Their game is to blame anyone and everyone. Immigrants, people of color, the disabled, the LGBTQ, until they realized it's a lie. So, as Jesus said, first take out the plank in thy own eye before you talk about the splinter in your neighbor's eye. This is the time that we must take the plank out of our own eye. Now, whatever you decide you love, and you want to have a good fight, a spiritual fight, to win over the hearts and minds for social justice, for truth, for compassion, then here I request from you, figure out what you love. Figure out what you could do through your art, through your music, through your writings, through whatever it is you find a gift, a powerful gift that can change the hearts and minds of others. I remember Sky sharing in the last meeting about talking to her relatives about what they were afraid of, instead of having arguments of ideology. So I called my brother in Brazil, and I just talked to him about him and tried my hardest to impart compassion and empathy without judging him so harshly. That plank in your eye is your responsibility. I don't know what it is for you to fight the good fight, but I'm telling you, your house is burning. And your way of life is being called forth to stand in the good fight. Martin Luther King, Dr. King, Nelson Mandela, and then came up to me, in the 80s, Gorbachev was staunch in not tearing down that Berlin Wall. But a group of protesters changed his mind. And then I remember the words of Ronald Reagan saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear that wall down. It takes you. It takes me as a collective to make the difference, as Dalai Lama said. You must find what your good fight is. You must stand in it. You must do your work, and we must not whine. Why are we doing it again? Because as Elijah talks, life is not linear. Life is a spiral. And evolution is about doing everything we can to go to the next level of understanding with our compassion, with kindness, with our intuition that we know what is true. We make that declaration here. A world that works for everyone and all life on earth. That includes the people we don't like. That includes the bullies. And let me tell you, it's not to say that we don't have to eradicate bullies. But I'm going to let you know that in every garden, every spring, those weeds come up in your garden. Weeds are valuable. But if they start to invade the native species, and they don't remember their place in the ecosystem, they must be removed. Now, thought, powerful thought, energy, that makes everything we do viable. Your heart is beating. There's air to breathe. The blood flow, every cell and your body has this great intelligence. And we don't even have to think about it or really understand it. There's a great universe. There's a great opportunity for you to reach a bigger spiritual development. Because every teacher that gets where they want to go, they come back down. You know why? Because they know the oneness. We sure talk a lot about oneness. They become enlightened, they come back down. Because to empower others is to remember our wholeness, our interconnectedness, our radical interconnectedness. So don't sit there in despair. Figure out what you love. Be passionate. Take your anger and alchemize it, meaning turn it into passion. Because just like some of the medicines I take, like lisinopril, in the beginning, it came from a black mambo snake's venom. Poison can be the alchemist into power, into good medicine, into a good fight. Never be afraid of a good fight. That is not passive. Compassion is not passive. It's hard work. I implore you, it is your duty to resist the anger, the hatred, the division. It is your duty as a spiritual warrior. I implore you, stand up. Remember who you are. Remember the interconnectedness of our oneness. Find your place and do the good work. Thank you. And as we go into a prayer right now, let us remember that with each word, each heartfelt prayer into the universe demonstrates as action in helping our neighbor, in helping our loved ones to remember the truth of who we are, of why we're here. We are here to evolve and make a difference in this material journey. With this ego matrix, it's not our enemy, but a teacher. To teach us to go forth and remember what holds it all together. Our humanity, our oneness, our compassion, and our love. And this is the divine design. Seemingly opposites of negative and positive, making a whole. Let us not fight against something, but let us be for something and against nothing, as Ernest Holmes said. To be for something and against no thing. But to stand in a good fight, to have good righteousness, because that righteousness is from our intuition. It is from our instinct of survival that we are all here, interconnected, supporting the highest and the best for the growth and the joy and the compassionate love that we know is the truth of our being. And with that, I say, and so it is.